Hi everyone and welcome back to another video. If this is your first video, I am Arlathia. So for this one we have my personal comic Arlathia, page number 17. Here is a chicken scratch. So it's only 2 panels, as you can hopefully tell. So here's the beginning of it. This is actually take number 2 of this, because the first one I did, I made them way too small and I just didn't like it. Just not what I originally intended. So there's a second take where they're a little bigger, which I like a lot more. So for this first one, I have the sketches. So for this, I actually kind of wanted to give them all almost like a different facial expression of like how they feel about the situation. Because essentially, Wright's coming back up is what's going on. So he's like calling her name. So I kind of want to have Myra just kind of peeking around the Kanan, like, what? Kanan's, kind of like, something's not going to happen. Arlathia just looks pissed off, which is normal. If you hear barking or noises, I'm sorry. My window's open and my dog is wanting to bark at people for no reason. And then Celestin, he's just like, what? So that's kind of what I wanted to have going on here, and just kind of like starting to show like their different personalities too with all this, because that's just what I want. Because they're not all the same, like they all gotta be a little different. So I don't know. I actually kind of like how the little sketch turned out. I thought it actually turned out pretty good. So I was actually kind of happy with how I had it. But yeah, so take number 2 turned out a hell of a lot better than take number 1. And no, I will not show take number 1 because take number 1 is gone and it's just not worth it because it just looks bad. So I was really on the verge of coloring it, and then I was like, I don't like it. I'm gonna start over again, and we're gonna move on. So that's what we did. But overall, I think it looks good. Like, I don't know, I do. I like their little faces. I think it worked out really well. So, because I am trying to branch out a little more and try some new things and do stuff a little bit different, so it's not like all the same. It's kind of what the intention was. So that was the goal, which I think worked. Because when you actually see the next panel, which will be soon, you'll actually kind of see a little more about like their special skills, is what I call them. Because I feel like each like animal has like a certain skills. So whenever we get there, I'll explain what they are of what I'm trying to show here. Except for Kanan, but he's a different story. But but I was actually trying to figure out what I want to do for Celestin. But overall, since he's the cool cat, he's a hell of a lot calmer than the rest of them. So he's just like, what? So that's just what he is. Like, he's not super feisty or anything. Like, he's very chill, very relaxed. Like how I feel like cats are. Okay, so here's the next panel. So this is just a marker. So you can see in the background, I had Wright's head kind of pop up. So I was trying to make it look in like his hands on the, calling it a mountain hill of where they're standing, just to kind of show he is coming up and he's about to push himself over. So they jumped. So Kanan's actually afraid of heights because he knew kind of what was coming because they had to get off one way or the other. So Arlathia actually pulled him off, and the rest of them jumped off themselves. That's why he's freaking out, because he don't like that. So I have him doing that. So yeah, so that's why he looks scared out of his mind right now, because he's like, no, 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 no. Myra, since she has got wings, she can fly, so she jumped off ready to fly. And actually, in the next couple panels, you'll actually start seeing the mutations and all this good stuff. And I'm like so excited for the next ones because it's going to get a lot more interesting now. I promise. Because now we're going to see some action and a little more story and all that stuff. So it's going to be good. But that's what I wanted to hear, because it's like now I'm starting to show, because Kanan, like Kanan has speed, so like going down a mountain doesn't necessarily need it at the moment, because they're bumpy, it's rocky, he could trip, fall, whatever. So it was just easier just to kind of have him being pulled off, just to kind of show like you can't really tell that he's afraid of heights, but I just thought it would be easier just to kind of show like it's just not something that he normally deals with because he don't like it. And Myra was just ready to go. I don't know, I like drawing the wings, so I thought it was kind of fun. So I was trying not to do them like huge, but big enough it would make sense for her to be able to carry people. Obviously, like that, she couldn't carry anyone, so she has to mutate if she's going to carry people, because she's bigger and they're stronger and they're mutated. So that's what this was. But it's just for this right now. Or at least just want to have her start flying, because that's what she can do. Like, she doesn't have to run, like she can just fly and she can do all that good stuff. Aerodynamic over here. And then for the actual like coloring itself, because the sun is now like pointed right at them, essentially. So I was trying to figure it out because I was like, I don't want to have it with no shading at all because it's kind of boring. I guess it would have made sense for it to be around, but I'm also like, when you look at stuff, like there's still like indents and everything. So I was like, what am I gonna do with this? So that's what I was trying to do. It's not perfect, but I was trying to make it work. Because I'm like, there's still gotta be shading somewhere. Like Kanan over here with his mouth open, so obviously there's gonna be some type of shading right there. Because he's gonna have his face either scrunched up, or there's gonna be a bunch of lines in there, like his facial muscles are moving, like all that kind of stuff. Even in his hand, I'm like, there's gotta be something, because he's got, you have your palm and everything where the thumb's connected and all this stuff. Myra was a little easier because most of it is in shadow because she's been kind of bent over, so it's easier to do that with her legs. Part of her chest was in shadow because of where her head's at, so it kind of made sense. Even just being it round would be shadow around that. Her wings, I had in shadow because they were pointed behind her, so not necessarily like having the light around them was the intention for that. Her arms too, because they're behind her ears and stuff, so it kind of made sense because they're pulled back too. Have those in shadow, not really have any like light touching them. But it's also like I didn't try to want to make anything like super dark just because. But there's these. Her hair, because it's moving, so I was trying to like show it like that's what it's doing. Like it's kind of like curved in and curved out, essentially is what I was wanting to do, which I think I kind of got. I'm still trying to figure out how to do hair, but it's a slow process, but I'm getting there. So now for Celestin, because he's a cat, like one of his special skills is like jumping, essentially is what I have. So he kind of just jumped off. So he can kind of bound down the rock pretty far, or like he can jump up really high, like that kind of thing, like it's a frog. So cats, like I guess felines and like frogs or amphibians, whatever you want to call them, kind of have like that same special skill of jumping. And then like same thing with like canines and like the cheetah or whatever would also be like speed. So that was kind of the idea, or like bats and birds. So I was like, they all kind of have the same skill. It just matter how they use them. So yeah, but he's also got his little fiddly thing, so it kind of help him glide up more too, and they can actually kind of catch more air, so he can go up higher. Is why he's got his little frills. But that's what I was wanting to show, because I like the foreshortening. I don't think I did too bad on. Like I think it actually kind of works with the foreshortening a little bit. It's not perfect, but what I had in my head, I was like, it kind of works overall. That's also why I was coloring them certain way too. Like certain parts are just like the straight, like their straight main color, is because they're farther back. So that's what I was trying to push was that since they're farther back, there's not going to be much detail or attention to that stuff. It's still connected to them, like it's still part of them. But that's just what I was thinking of. I was like, just to kind of help with the foreshortening even more, because I was looking at like a comic book like a art comic book I have, where it kind of like explains like how you can like do comics and stuff. Because like certain parts of the body, like they even have like completely shaded, like there's no details on it, like it's just shaded. So I was trying to do here, like, because I was like, let me incorporate that a little bit, which I think actually kind of works. It makes kind of sense, but it also kind of helps like anything that's actually farther up front is in detail and more focused on. But like his hand and stuff, I was trying to have it bigger than his head because I'm like, it is coming forward because he did jump, so it's getting ready to like catch him so he can do his neck sleep. Is what I was doing here. And even the shading too, I was like, for him the shading was easier because his hand is extended, so it's like more of it's gonna be behind him, so it was easier for shading. But I was still trying to make it round because body parts are kind of round, they're not straight. So I was trying to give that effect too with the shading, was just to make it rounded. So it kind of works. I was making it work as best I could. Because that's why I was like, okay, how's this gonna work if I'm gonna do this, this, and this? So I made it work. So I don't think overall it looks too bad. But yeah, you can see here what I'm talking about with his leg and his little jacket flaps and his tail. Like there's no shading. So I just made it pretty much white. And then I just added shading to it just to kind of give it more of a 3D dimension. But it's not like something you should super focus on. So I think it actually looks kind of cool. It might look a little odd, but I think it kind of makes sense to do it that way, just so it's not flat. It still gives a little bit of something, but it's not something to focus on. It's still a part of him, but I probably got to work on it a little more. I think with Arlathia here, you can kind of see, we'll get to her in a minute. You can kind of see how I did her green with the arms and stuff, how I kind of faded it into her, which I think kind of makes a little more sense. Just to kind of fade it, versus just having it straight one color. But for Celestin, it kind of made sense because everything got cut off. So I was like, versus having it faded, because it doesn't make much sense if it's not faded. Because a lot of that actually is just white. So it was easier just to have it all white. So was it super there? Again, it's there. It adds a little bit, but it's not something to focus on because it's farther behind him. I don't know if any of this makes sense, but I'm just trying to explain my little thought process of what I was doing here. Because I kind of like it. I think it makes sense. So I'm going to do it more because I think it helps to keep it focused somewhere you're supposed to, especially with the foreshortening while I'm trying to like figure it out and get better at it. Just to do it this way. Because it kind of adds like a cool little feature without really doing too much. Everything's still there, but I don't have to worry about adding a whole bunch of detail because it's so small. And it kind of helps because it's still like showing as a part of them. But because it's farther back, I don't have to have it focused on. So for me, it just makes a bunch of sense to do it that way. And it kind of works. But again, it looks pretty dang cool. That's just how I feel though. I think once I do it more and I get a little bit better at it, it'll improve. But just for now, just trying to like figure it out and do it now, it works. Because I'm probably going to end up doing it a lot more too whenever I start doing more of their like poses and everything with like either them fighting or just doing like a bunch of stuff or a bunch of tricks or moves or whatever. It's probably when it's going to come to. So that's kind of the idea right now. You know? But for his shading, like his leg was easy because his leg's kind of like kicked up behind him. So it was like underneath his body. So that was kind of easier to do. But his face, because it's kind of putting more down, I was trying to have it where the shading was around the edges. So it's like the top part of it's still in light, if you will. His back was interesting. I still added a little bit of shading. I didn't do a whole bunch because most of it's in the light. But I just want to have it, again, to give it some dimension. I don't want stuff flat. It's boring if it's flat. I want to add a little bit of something just to kind of give it. So now Arlathia, because her main thing is her quills. So for her, I just want to have her jumping. Just like straight up just jumping off. So she was probably the more difficult one because I was trying to figure out how all this stuff would look. But overall, I think it's fine. Like I had the idea. Because I used my little comic drawing book I had just to, because there was a couple poses I could have used. I had to like do a mismatch of them, but it still gave me an idea of what to do. So that's what I was doing. So, but she was probably the more complicated of all of them because she actually had more body showing than the other ones. So she was a little more interesting. But it still works. Still. Again, the more I do it, the better it's going to get. It's just a matter of time and practice. But I get there eventually. But I did order an actual, like, poses comic book thing, which I think will help a lot, just until I can get better and get used to them, so it'll help with a bunch of stuff. I'm still going to keep my style of drawing, though, like, I'm not going to completely change it. But at least pose-wise, when I'm doing certain things, I think it'll help. And that way I can get a better idea of what I'm trying to do. Because some of these poses, I'm like, does this make sense? And I'm like, I don't know. So at least this way, like in my head it does, but I'm like, does it actually make sense in real life? I'm not sure. But I think once I get that book in, it'll help out a bunch. Because it'll start making more sense with things, and it actually might help. And if they do have shading themselves, it'll actually help me get better at shading too. Because I'm working on that. But I don't get it correct. So I think there's still a couple things I mess up on. But that's okay. It's just me. It's just the way I do it. But for her shading, Because she is mostly pointed towards the light. I was trying to have the shading again around the edges as much as I could. Unless there's some muscle definition, just to kind of help show that. But I feel like the body was okay with the shading, because it is kind of pulled back more if she's going straight down, because she's stretched out. But it's also like if you go up the rounded ways, because it technically would be rounded, especially on like the stomach area where the shorts are with the belt, it'd be rounded if she's coming up, right? So that would kind of make sense. Now this, and my dog's gonna bark for a minute while the mailman comes. I'm sorry. I hope you guys enjoyed my dog song. And hopefully it wasn't too loud. He likes to sing sometimes when people walk up to the door and they're not doing anything wrong. But so here's what I'm also talking about with the arms when I was doing where it's like less color, or like less details and just straight color. With this, I think this actually looks kind of cool, just to kind of have it faded like that. This is just different. I even did it for Kanan, which you can also see on his arm and stuff, where it's all faded. There's no detail, but it's faded in. But I still give it some shading, just to give it a little bit of something. But it still kind of shows it's a part of them. But because it's so far back, there's just not much point out in the detail. So, but it's also trying to get better at that too, is like what level of detail do you stop when you keep adding it, that kind of thing. So I think this works overall. But it also just does, to me, it gives it a cool effect. Because it's just something different. So I kind of like it. But I probably will end up doing a lot more of this, especially when it comes to them doing moves or them fighting the Rhytons. Because the Rhytons are so large, they'll probably have detail. They won't. They'll probably just be those continuous, just like outlines I do with the colors and just showing the moves, because I'm like, there ain't no way in hell I'm gonna sit here and put all the detail on here with these big ass creatures, and I'm doing it. So at least this way I can just keep with my outlines and just give you an idea of movement without making myself crazy. Because I will make myself crazy. Only just because of the size differences, and I'm not doing that. I'd much rather not. So to me, it's just kind of easier just to do with the shading and the outlines, and just kind of give them the shading to give some type of depth, and just kind of get and just do the outlines. So I'm like, you know what? That works for me. I think it looks kind of cool. It makes it a little bit simpler for me to do anything, because my characters are like a simple complicated, and we're gonna simplify them just to help with the drawing process, and I think it'd make a little more sense, only because there's the size difference. So to me, that's what that would help. I think it also just kind of give my stuff like a bit of a different look, because it's not your normal constant details, like how everybody else does. It's just a little bit different. So I kind of like that idea. That's just me. But I think once I actually start doing it more, and I think it also helped my stuff stand out, because you don't normally see that. Because I know everybody else, like I've seen some people that I actually follow, like on Instagram, like they have these very like cute, very simple comics, so they can sit there and add in their little bit of detail they have. Me, I can't do that because mine's gonna be a little too much with that mess. And it was just like really cluttered and really bad if I did that, and I will make myself crazy if I um don't sit here and simplify them as much as possible. And I don't want to make myself crazy. I'd rather much not. I want to have fun while I do this and have it make sense. So that's kind of the whole point, you know? It's got to make sense but look cool and cohesive at the same time, and you got to be able to tell what the hell's going on, because if you can't, then it defeats the purpose of the story. So I think the outlines, when I do them, it will help out a bunch. And I think it's just going to make sense and help. But again, I also think it will give it a very cool overall effect with everything. But that's just me. Maybe once I start doing it and you guys actually see it, it'll, because you actually might like that too. I think it's just going to give it like a nice, cool, different effect. But here is the final. Here's everybody together. I'm so excited because I've been waiting to do this page forever. But yeah, so the first one is just called Arlathia Meeting Part 1. So the meeting essentially is meeting all the characters, or at least some of them, at least like the main 4 and the writings is what this one's about. And we'll keep going because there's going to be 4 total. But we'll keep going as we go. But here's them. But I love them. So it's just kind of fun. It's a bit of different personality. It looks kind of cool. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!